Thursday, a very busy Thursday here at the Browns Training Complex in Berea, Ohio. I'm Jason Gibbs. He's Nick Shook. He's Andrew Gribble. We are getting you ready for Browns and Jets. This is the best podcast available. Game preview, episode 3 of the season, because we figure episode 1 is a preview, episode 2 is a recap, and now we're back to the preview yet again. We get ready for Monday Night Football. The Browns looking for their first win of the season. It's been a week, guys, and technically it's the Wednesday workout, according to Freddie. So we're all discombobulated, and we're working our way through it. But a lot of guys talked in the locker room today, making some headlines.
Changing narratives. That's how I'll describe it.
Yeah, fair enough. And it was interesting. There was a little something missing today, obviously, and we'll get to that here as we get a little bit further into the podcast. Christian Kirksey sits down with Andrew Gribble, and we'll give you our keys to the game on Monday night. But Baker at the podium today, Odell at the podium. This is a group of guys that know that they've got a lot of things to clean up after Sunday's tough loss.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best time possible to have an extra practice. I mean, they got a full extra practice in this week on Tuesday, went into the off day thinking about that, and then come back today for really what is your most intensive practice of the week. And I think that this team needs all the work it can get after a performance like they had in the season opener. You lose by 30 in the way you did in a really sloppy game that you really can't really point to much that you did great in that game. You need all the work you can get, especially going into an environment like this one on Monday where you're not going to be gearing yourself up thinking about how great this opponent is in the New York Jets, but that just puts more pressure and more focus on what you have to do well, and that's going to test kind of where this team is at mentally.
Yeah, I think the only way that you can ensure success or as close to a chance of success as you would like on that stage is just through preparation. And luckily you get that extra day, and hopefully that they're maximizing that. It seems as though they are, and we'll be able to use that to clean up some of the issues and mistakes that they made, in week 1, and hope that it doesn't happen again. You're not going to win football games committing 18 penalties, but I'm ready, and I'm sure they're very ready or are already past it to get past saying the number 18 in regards to penalties. Hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Well, and I would think, there are going to be penalties that are committed, whether it's penalties we actually commit or ones that the referees think we committed that we really didn't commit. It's going to happen one way or the other, probably between 5 and 10, and you want to be a lot closer to 5 than you do 10.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be near double digits.
No.
And the amount that the Browns had in the first half on Sunday was a bad game, and then the second half happened. I mean, that's the issue. I mean, you had enough penalties in the first half to say we had a sloppy game, and you need to be around 2 or 3 per half, and hopefully avoiding. You'll take the holds, the offsides, the neutral zone infractions, things like that. It's the 15-yarders, the unsportsmanlikes that are completely in your control, and avoiding those. Those are the ones you just take out those from Sunday's game, and it's a pretty sloppy game, but it's not a historically sloppy game.
Yeah, going back and watching that game, I thought a lot of those 15-yarders, those unsportsmanlikes, were the product of guys probably just getting caught too much in the emotion and in the moment of the game. And, for a much-anticipated season and being at home and the energy that was in that building that day, that's understandable, but that can't happen again because this is going to be just as an energetic stadium. The only difference will be they won't have the home crowd support behind them. They'll be the enemy walking into enemy turf and trying to come out with a victory. So maybe they'll use that to their advantage, but really they got to keep a level head and not get caught up in the moment.
And there will be opportunities, as one Greg Williams will be welcoming them in.
Yes.
Not with open arms. Let's just put it that way. If anything specific that you took away from this week's availability so far, is there anything that stood out to you? Anything in the locker room vibe-wise?
I mean, all things considered, they were pretty upbeat after today's practice. I think that there's a general sentiment that they are very sick of talking about last week's game. You hear that from Freddie as well today. Like when he gets any questions that reference last week's game, he brings up the fact he really doesn't want to talk about this game anymore. They've kind of adopted that. They watched that film and they flushed it, and they've kind of embraced that mentality. And I think that it was interesting today. it's unavoidable for this team to not know that Sam Darnold isn't playing in this game on Monday.
Correct.
And they found out that news just like we all did right before their practice today. So they know that going in. I almost think it's better that you get it out of the way earlier in the week, because if it happened later, then maybe some of these younger guys get that false boost of confidence from that. You've got a few days now to flush out that mentality and being like, Trevor Siemian could still beat you. Like, so I think it's good to get that out of the way, get the initial reaction that all the fans have that are like, oh, wow, this is a game the Browns should definitely win. So I think it's good to get out of the way, and I think that they know already that it's been drilled into their heads for the last few hours from coaching and everything that the injury to Darnold doesn't matter at all.
I might be in the minority on this, but I don't have as high of an opinion of Sam Darnold as I think the average person does. I think he's got the potential to be a very good quarterback, but I don't think he's there yet. And I don't think the drop-off from Sam Darnold to Trevor Siemian is as substantial as one might make it out to be, especially if you're talking to people who are in the New York media, because, you get that kind of push where they want that guy to be the next guy. I don't really know if he's that guy yet. So I think that it's an advantage that this is coming out today because they get another couple of days to prepare to play against a guy like Trevor Siemian. I'm not saying he's better, but I just don't think the gap between the two is as substantial as people are making it out to be. And I think you can avoid maybe coasting or some pitfalls or going into the game and going, oh, well, we had to play his backup. There are only 32 starters, and there are 32 backups. Those are the 64 best quarterbacks on the planet right now. They're still really good.
Is the injury worth noting? Is the C.J. Mosley injury more important maybe than the Sam Darnold injury?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is by far. Because you look at what happened last week with the Bills and the Jets game, they were shutting them out, and the defense at one point had all their points with a touchdown and a safety. C.J. Mosley's a really good player, as Baker Mayfield learned at the end of last year's season finale. Perennial Pro Bowler that the Ravens probably would have loved to kept, but they couldn't afford. The Jets paid him a ton of money, and Greg Williams likes having – we saw how much he loved Joe Schobert. He loves having a guy in the middle of his defense that can do a lot of different things, and C.J. Mosley's really good at covering and really good in coverage. So he is it completely changed the game when he came out. Buffalo all of a sudden turned into a team that could score, and they won the game because of it. So I think that while losing the quarterback is such a huge loss for a team, Adam Gase has won a lot of games with some bad quarterbacks. So I think he can get Siemian prepared for this game, but I don't know if there is a way to replace C.J. Mosley in this defense, especially they've lost Avery Williamson for the season. They've had a number of other different injuries. They could be without Quinnen Williams. They've got a lot of guys banged up, and we saw this team last year. Those games that Joe Schobert was out, there was a big difference on that defense, and I think that Mosley is a really good player.
Yeah, linebacker-dependent scheme that, if Mosley were to be out, they're also without Avery Williamson, who was a key player in their defense last year, and so they're thin at the position if Mosley's out. And I think, like Gribble said, it's a massively different defense that you're looking at then, because they're a defensive front, three down linemen and a linebacker, and if you're already thin at linebacker, you know what you got up front, but if Quinnen Williams is also hurt, you're thinner there. Really, the strength of the defense then exists at the safety position, so that's the last line of defense. They're going to have to bring him up. It could create opportunities for big plays. It could also open up things underneath because those players just aren't at the same level. So there is some potential for the Browns to really get this offense going, which they couldn't do in week one. Regardless of whether Mosley is playing or not, I do not think this defense as a whole is as good as Tennessee's defense was last year. Tennessee had three very good, rangy, athletic linebackers who created headaches for Baker Mayfield last week. And I don't think that New York has that same personnel, and especially does not if Mosley can't play.
On the Browns side of things, how concerning is it that right now we know of two healthy tackles on the roster? And Lamb didn't practice. It doesn't sound promising. We don't have anything official. But right now you've got two tackles on your roster. And after what happened last week on the offensive line, you may be a little surprised that we haven't gone out and made a move for a tackle.
I'm surprised, but it might also be a reflection on the tackle market. There just aren't – these guys just don't exist and be unemployed at this time of year.
It's tough. It's really hard to even find a premier or near premier tackle in the NFL right now, let alone somebody that you think you could just sign and plop in there in case of emergency. I mean, that's why you spend the money to go get a backup guy like a Kendall Lamb. It's unfortunate that he's hurt. I also think that Justin McCray could be called into duty in case of emergency. He did it last week. and maybe we'll see a different activated group of offensive linemen this week than we did last week.
All right, so to follow up, playing for Campen in the past has to be a big help for him if he's going to make that transition to tackle.
That had to be a major factor in why he was activated for week 1 as opposed to some of the other players. I mean, he was active over Austin Corbin and I believe Wyatt Teller as well. So that tells you everything you need to know right there. He's more familiar with the system. He can step in and do it quicker. And probably there's an element of trust there that, hey, I know what this guy can do. When they ended up shifting him over to the right tackle, he wasn't great, but he did have a couple nice blocks that set up some things. Obviously, the Browns offense shot themselves in the foot so much with penalties that it really didn't matter or shine through. But there were moments there where he showed he could be capable, replacement level or, enough to plug the hole for now. And right now, as it stands, we don't even have to talk about that. So I don't think it's as big of a concern. It can become one, but like Gribble said, I think it's more indicative of the tackle market and the lack of available options more than anything.
You have some guys out there that know the system that you're clearly not interested in. Brad Seaton's on the Tampa Bay practice squad. Finney Ganafo and Vornkall are nowhere right now. They're not on any rosters right now.
That was good.
Finney,
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, those are guys that are available, but clearly not interested at the moment to fill those spots. So I guess you just roll with McCray and hope for no injuries or ejections.
All right. Hopefully no ejections this week. No kicking anybody. I think Greg Robinson's learned his lesson. I don't think there'll be any more of that. Are there any other injuries right now on this team that concern you?
I don't know about concern, but I think it's clear that Adarius Taylor is going to miss some time. But that I was asked in my mailbag yesterday about why Jannard Avery was inactive for this game, and you look at the snaps, the way they were distributed, there just wasn't a place for him. And I think that you played Kirksey and Schobert every snap. You played Adarius Taylor 3 snaps, and that was it for the linebackers. No other linebackers saw the field on defense, and your backup pass rushers, Chris Smith and Chad Thomas, had less than 10 snaps apiece. So this is a defense that's going to go with its elite guys, and if you're not able to help out on a variety of special teams, which Avery has in the past, but I think they found a guy in Malik Jefferson that can fill those roles at a pretty high level, that's what's going to make you inactive. Now, would Jannard Avery be inactive this week? I'd be very surprised because you got some injured guys. So I think that you're going to have Avery available for you. It's just a matter of how you use him. But Taylor's the one guy that's hurt that I imagine won't be available. Dontrell Hilliard, it makes you wonder if you're going to have to bring up a running back by game time on Monday. Elijah McGuire, former Jet, he's on the practice squad, could be an option. And then the one that I'll keep an eye on is Rashard Higgins, just because I think they missed him in the second half of Sunday's game. I think that he's a really good player. Ratley is fine. He missed a lot of the preseason. Like the chemistry is just not as on that level. Rashard Higgins is a really good receiver because he's not gifted with the same set of skills that Jarvis Landry and Odell have, but he has gotten better because of his chemistry with Baker. And I think that he was definitely missed. He was a key presence on that opening drive. So if you can have him back, that'll be huge for the offense.
Yeah, I agree with all these points. Top to bottom. Yeah.
The one guy that unfortunately we're not sure will be there or not, and clearly has had a pretty devastating week, would be Chris Smith, and the loss of his girlfriend after a vehicle wreck late night Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. They have a newborn. She's just a few weeks old, and it was a horrible day in this building yesterday. And there's no other way really to put it. You just felt sick to your stomach all day. The team has really rallied, and Freddie has talked about that. A lot of the guys in the locker room had something to say about that, and that's what I meant when we started the podcast. There was a little something missing in the locker room today. Guys have turned the page to New York, but there's some laughing and there's some joking around, but there was something missing today. And I think a lot of it has to do with Chris Smith and the personality and what he brings to this football team. And, our thoughts and prayers are with him, and, Godspeed in terms of being able to get back. But he's got to come back when he's ready to come back. And there's a lot of other things that are way more important than football right now that are going on in his world.
Yeah, Freddie said it best that, we're all here to we cover football. They play football, they coach football. That it's the main part of their lives. But football is not number one. Life hits you sometimes, gives you some perspective. It makes you realize that football is not the end all be all. And moments like this will make you realize that.
Yeah, and I got into it with Kirksey a little bit, but I mean, we fans all know who Chris Smith is, I think, by this point. The diehards especially. He's been a key part of this defense the last 2 years. But, we all see it. We travel with the team. We see him in the locker room every day. Like, this is the definition of the most infectious personality in this entire locker room. I mean, I've always lobbied that he would maybe be a dark horse candidate for a captain on this team because he's so vocal. He's just like kind of always has the pulse of the locker room, friends with everyone. And clearly you hear from Baker. I think Baker knows Chris really well, and he's on defense, and the defensive line is really tight. I think he's really close with Devlin Lawrence, Larry Ogunjobi, Christian Kirksey. I mean, this guy, since he's arrived here last year, has really just made his presence felt, a guy that truly loves being around this team and loves playing the game. And I can't wait to see him back in here when he's ready to go, but certainly no rush. I mean, this is a serious thing to get through.
Yeah, our thoughts are with his girlfriend's family and his family, of course, as well. And we just wish the best for him and take what you need time-wise to get back on the field. You talked about it with Christian Kirksey, and for that interview and our keys to the Browns and Jets on Monday night, make sure you subscribe to this podcast.
Subscribe.
The best podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check it out at clevelandbrowns.com. For Nick Shook, for Andrew Gribble, I'm Jason Gibbs. This has been the best podcast available.